Diane, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming by.
You're very welcome.
Now, I am sure that you would never characterize yourself this way, but if someone were to call you one of the drivers of early childhood education in America, what would they be referring to?
I think they'd be referring to the creative curriculum
Yes.
and the assessment system, teaching strategies goal that we developed and published.
Just that little thing that you did.
Just that little thing.
I read where your goal when you started in education was, and I'm quoting you, was to become the best teacher possible. You ended up in publishing. Did you ever feel like you moved away from your original goal?
Well, in a way I did. I did want to be the best teacher. I had wonderful preparation for that, majoring in child development under Uri Bronfenbrenner and getting a master's from Bank Street while I was teaching at the 92nd Street Y, and
Great
then
places.
teaching kindergarten in New Haven. So I did teach for a while. But then in 1966, I went to Mississippi and Head Start was just starting, and I applied for a job to be a teacher, and OEO said, oh no, you're going to be the ed coordinator. You're going to set up the education program, and this program is going to serve 900 children, and you're going to train teachers. And that's how I got into training teachers. And then there really wasn't anything that I could call curriculum, so I started developing my own materials on a mimeograph machine, very early
I remember those.
technology.
Yes.
And then in the 70s, I lived in Washington, D.C., working in child care programs and Head Start programs. And I noticed that how teachers arranged the classroom was working against their goals for children. So I started taking pictures before and after we would rearrange the classrooms. And I would use those slides in presentations I was giving. And other trainers would say, I've got to have those slides. So I thought, okay, I'll get somebody to publish a film strip. And so I wrote up what I wanted to publish, and I couldn't get any publishers to publish it. So I said, I'm just going to publish it myself. And that was the first effort to, and then from then on, I just
It was almost out of necessity, or you were creating the materials for yourself.
Yeah.
They became useful for others, and
Exactly.
all of a sudden they became useful for tens, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
You wrote that education coordinators told us that the two questions they found the most challenging were, one, what should a preschool curriculum include? And two, what does it mean to individualize instruction? Would you say the same questions are relevant and pertinent today?
Well, they're important questions, but we have the answers today, and we didn't have them in the 80s when teachers were and ed coordinators were saying, well, what do I mean by curriculum? So NAEYC has defined what the components are of an appropriate and comprehensive curriculum for early childhood, as has Head Start, and so we know the answers to that question now.
One of the slides that you created back in the 1980s, and apparently you wrote, the aim of education is to help children become successful learners and socially competent. And two things struck me. One is that seems exactly true today as it did 30 years ago. And two, that means that any difference today perhaps is not in the what, but perhaps in the how. And maybe that ties back to what you were just discussing. What we've learned from the science can change the how, can change the way we get to those outcomes. Is that right?
Well, we know what high quality looks like. And so if I were to go into a classroom, I would know by what was up on the walls, that it was children's work, it wasn't just these pretty posters, that I would see a well-organized environment, labeled so children know that everything has a place and each area is engaging for them. I would see children working together and collaborating and playing together. I would see teachers asking interesting questions of children, working one-on-one or in small groups, being very intentional about how they were interacting with children and what they wanted to convey to children. So we know what it looks like today. We just don't always achieve it.
No, we don't. And to that point, to be able to achieve it, and thinking back, you mentioned your work with Head Start, teaching in New Haven, studying at the Bank Street and teaching at the 92nd Street Y. You have seen education in a lot of different formats and teaching in a lot of different formats. If you could today wave a magic wand and remove whatever you see as the major obstacle, the biggest change that could be made, what would that be?
Well, there'd be a lot of things if I had a magic wand, but I think I would refer to NAEYC's new position statement on equity in early childhood programs. I would want to see every child, especially children who are at risk, have access to a high quality program, and those are the children who often don't have that access. I'd want to see teachers who work in early childhood program, whether they work with infants and toddlers or preschool children, get the respect and support that they need, the resources to be able to get an education, the support to be able to make that part of their life. There's so much inequity right now for children and for teachers. We really need to implement that very excellent position paper, and that would be my goal.
That would be your goal. After creating teaching strategies, you now are focused on the Dodge Family Fund. Mm-hmm. What is the Dodge Family Fund, and what's the focus of the fund itself?
From that little film strip, my first publication, I never envisioned that Teaching Strategies would become the successful company it became. And when I decided that I wanted to spend more time with my 5 grandchildren and do something different, and sold the company, it was phenomenal what the company was worth. And my husband and 3 daughters and I decided that we wanted to use that money to give back, to continue the mission of Teaching Strategies, which was to promote programs that would help children in poverty to be successful and to promote the early childhood profession. And so we've been giving out maybe 40 grants by now.
Wow.
Anything from children's museums so that low-income families would have access to it, and Head Start programs, to professional development, to bringing the arts into early childhood programs. Just wonderful, exciting programs, and we get to visit many of them, and it's very rewarding.
I'm sure it is, after having made the impact that you made through mimeographing and then publishing at scale. This is a new and I'm sure very rewarding way. Diane, thank you. Thank you for stopping by the studio, and thank you for the work that you've done.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.